Sekulow in Washington, D.C. The issue cybersecurity and the president being given the authority to shut down your internet.
Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live.
It's long been said that the revolutions in communications and information technology have given birth to a virtual world. But make no mistake, this world, cyberspace, is a world that we depend on every single day. It's our hardware and our software, our desktops and laptops and cell phones and BlackBerries that have become woven into every aspect of our lives. It's the broadband networks beneath us and the wireless signals around us, the local networks in our schools and hospitals and businesses, and the massive grids that power our nation. It's the classified military and intelligence networks that keep us safe, and the World Wide Web that has made us more interconnected than at any time in human history. Cyberspace is real, and so are the risks that come with it.
And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
Hey, welcome to the broadcast, everyone, and welcome to Washington, D.C. Many issues on Capitol Hill right now that we're dealing with. One we may have to be dealing with not just on Capitol Hill, but in the courts, and that's because there is a very troubling bill that is coming through the United States Congress. The issue, it's called the CyberSecurity Act of 2009. Now, in and of itself, the title sounds innocuous. It sounds fine. We know there have been attempts at cyber attacks in the United States. Those are real. We've had to deal with those. In fact, if you go to aclj.org, we've got a special interview that I did on that subject. But the fact that we're dealing with now and the seriousness of this, and I think this is where we've got to be very, very clear, is this bill, as drafted, even with modifications that have been made, gives the president the authority to shut down the Internet, not just for the government, but for all of us. Exactly what we were complaining about, what the Iranian government was doing in Iran, is exactly what this bill would give the President Obama, the authority to do.
That's right. I'm on Twitter right now, and it's exactly what was happening in Iran. That's how the information was getting out from people, because the mainstream media in Iran was completely shut down. Journalists were jailed. Iranian Revolutionary Guard secret services were on Twitter checking out, trying to track down people, so everyone was changing their location around the world to Tehran to confuse the Revolutionary Guard. But governments are getting smarter. And governments also know that news is more and more coming from places like Twitter and less coming from places like ABC, CBS, or NBC at the nightly news. In fact, by the time you get your newspaper in the morning, it's old news. It's 24 hours old. This is important, folks. It gives the president the power to seize control because of a so-called cybersecurity emergency. What's the definition of that?
Well, there is no definition in the bill that's clear. If there was a real cyber attack, like September 11th attack, of course the president has the authority under existing law to take measures. But those measures do not include, Stuart, the ability for the president to shut down the Internet, a communication between me and you.
Well, it seems like they're just trying to quelch opposing viewpoints and keep an eye on it. We've seen this out of this administration. Jay, it's like the fairness doctors. They want to keep an eye on, they want to monitor basically opposing viewpoints and be able to shut it down at will using the Constitution of the United States to do so.
You know, the idea that if you take the fairness doctrine and put that in context, Jordan, to this attempt at cybersecurity, we've looked at the bill. It's called the CyberSecurity Act of 2009. The bill would actually give the President of the United States, without any check, the ability to shut down the Internet based on his own determination, not even through the cabinet, not through the Congress.
Well, it does a lot of stuff, though, even worse. In fact, it gives the White House this periodic mapping ability to look into private data networks deemed to be critical, and those companies, that they have to share that information, which means even before this so-called emergency, this gives the federal government more insight into what you're going to, what websites you're looking at, what your networks are doing. That's why this is important. If you look at the overall scheme of this administration, they're looking at this. This is the question they ask themselves every single day. How do we vest more power into ourselves? How do we take more control away from parents, away from individuals, and put it into the hands of not the state government, the federal government? They want to take out school boards. They want to take out internet companies. Now they want to see what you're doing online, even before a so-called cybersecurity.
And they take it a step further to, of course, the First Amendment atrocities here are voluminous. We'll get into that in the next segment of the broadcast. But the reality is this kind of authority, left unchecked, basically is another, as Jordan just said, federal power grab, but it's the ability to silence our voice, whether it's over the airways through the Fairness Doctrine or here through the Internet. Here's what we want you to do, folks. We are going to oppose this legislation. We're not parsing this. We're not looking at different sections of it. We've reviewed it. We've analyzed it. We've got a several-page analysis up on the website. Here's the answer. No to the Cybersecurity Act of 2009. It's that simple. It's that straightforward. I need you to sign that petition right now. Here's the number. It's 1-877-989-2255. 1-877-989-2255 or aclj.org. There's a very troubling development on Capitol Hill. It's the cybersecurity bill that we've been talking about, promoted by Senator Rockefeller. It would give the president unchecked and unbridled authority to close down the internet, including your ability to communicate via email. Now, as outrageous as it sounds, that's exactly what we were objecting to in Iran this past summer when the government there shut down the civil protest of the students. The reason why? The government wanted to control what was being said on the internet. Well, that same authority is now being proposed to allow President Obama to close down the internet on demand in the event of a national emergency. Now, we think this is wrong. We think it's unconstitutional. We need to oppose it. Call it right now. It's 1-877-989-2255. Say no to this bill. 1-877-989-2255. You can also go to aclj.org. Welcome back to Washington, D.C. Breaking news here.
The issues that matter most to you and your family, profiled every day on Sekulow Live. And with these challenging times, you know that the American Center for Law and Justice is committed to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms. The ACLJ stands ready to defend the Constitution. The fact is that the work of the ACLJ could not occur without your support. And now, for a limited time, your gift will be double. The ACLJ's $875,000 Justice, Life, and Freedom Matching Challenge will match every contribution made to the ACLJ up to the total of the challenge. There's never been a better time to support the critical work of the American Center for Law and Justice. With this matching challenge, the impact of any gift you give today will literally be doubled in the fight to protect life and liberty. Participate in this matching challenge at the ACLJ secured website. That's www.aclj.org.
Welcome back to the broadcast, everyone. We're coming to you from Washington, D.C. The issue we're talking about is called the Cybersecurity Act of 2009. Sounds, like I said in the beginning of the program, sounds innocuous, but it gives the president the unchecked right and ability to shut down the internet, not just of the federal government, but between all of us in the event of a security attack. Look, there's been attempts, Stuart, at security attacks in the United States, but you don't have to remove the First Amendment protections in order to protect national security. And you certainly shouldn't be shutting down the discussions that individual citizens have with each other, especially during a security attack.
Well, this just isn't appropriate in a free, democratic Western society. This is what we saw in Iran. This is what you see in China. This is what you see in totalitarian regimes, communist regimes, where they try to basically stamp out opposing viewpoints and lines of communication between people that basically are on the other side of issues. This here is unchecked balances of constitutional limitations that Obama really is overreaching, and we can't let him do it, Jay.
And this affects the private sector here, Jordan. This is communications. You were just mentioning the whole situation in Iran. We were lodging protests at the United Nations saying you cannot shut down the free speech rights of individual citizens of Iran to communicate via Twitter, via the internet. But that's exactly what this bill gives the president the unchecked, unfettered right to do.
Yeah, we're still filing complaints on that very issue. Can you imagine, here we are in the United States of America criticizing the government of Iran while our own senators here, both a Republican and a Democrat, propose legislation that would give the executive branch, the federal government, the ability to basically shut down the internet anytime they deem a, quote, cyber security breach or cybersecurity emergency, which isn't even defined. And let me tell you something, folks, and I'll talk to some younger audience here too. You want these senators defining cybersecurity? Most of them barely understand the internet. It's been a huge problem inside government. Courts don't understand it. Judges aren't able to understand the implication of the internet. The older the folks are, and that is the case, especially in the U.S. Senate, the less
Us excluded, of course, I might say.
But the less likely they are to understand how important the internet is to everyone's daily life now. Paying your bills, contacting your family members, and getting your news. You want to give the President of the United States the ability to take that away from you in one moment? That's what this bill would do.
All right, let me tell you how they define cyber, Stuart. Cyber is defined as anything having to do with the internet, telecommunications, computers, or computer networks. How much broader could it possibly be? It gives the President the right to shut down the internet, telecommunications, which means our phones, computers, which is how a lot of people get their news, or computer networks, which are the internal networks for companies.
We're giving one person the unchecked power to do this, and that's the outrageous point. There's no legislative body. There's no Security Council. There's no meeting of top advice. It's basically the President of the United States has this unchecked power. Jay, it just sounds like, again, what we're talking about when it comes to countries like China, North Korea, Iran. This unchecked power, it's frightening.
You know, I'm going to read this again, folks, and I'm going to tell you, you need to understand this. We go through these pieces of legislation line by line. We analyze it under the First Amendment. We look at the scope and where this is going to be at the end of the day, how it impacts. Here is how cyber is defined under this bill. Cyber is defined as anything having to do with the Internet,